This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and another mix and match episode for you today. Eddie Jones from Tokyo, a very busy man at the moment as he prepares for the all-important match between Japan and the Wallabies in Tokyo later this month. And Ewen McKenzie's cows weren't able to change their schedule, and so he is tending to those cows as we begin the program today. But Eddie Jones, welcome to Rugby Unity. And interestingly, I have had correspondence this week from a member of the Rugby Unity community, Lodza Banks from Zimbabwe. And he asked the question, or he has put through the question to me saying, David, can you ask Eddie Jones, when he was England coach, did he try and recruit the South African sensation Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu? Eddie Jones, is that true?
Well, at international level, you don't recruit players who are either eligible or not eligible. So he might have inquired whether he was eligible.
Okay, and was he eligible?
I really can't remember, mate. But you get this thing all the time, you know, so-and-so an agent, players not doing well in his own country. He may have some eligibility potentiality. I can't remember the details of it, mate, to be honest.
Okay, but so you don't have any recollection of actually sort of identifying him as a talented young player or seeing, did you ever see him play when he was as a younger man in South Africa?
Well, we knew he was a talent.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's a lot of various things you got to go through, and I can't remember the exact detail of it. Like, he's one of those kids, you know, that's going to be a good player. You know, how good he's going to be will just be dependent on how hard he's prepared to work and stay at his game. So we've seen little gems of his talent. You know, his performance in the last game was individually probably as good as you've seen for the last, 10 years at least. And, you know, if he works really hard at his game, keeps his feet on the ground, doesn't get carried away with all the hoopla, then he's going to be a player that wins test matches.
Yeah, certainly a very fine player. Well, very good. Thank you for sorting that out. And Lodza has a couple of other questions, but I do just want to move on to a discussion that we had off air last week around refereeing, because it has been coming up week after week. There's the ongoing discussions about, you know, the solution around the refereeing and what could happen. And you had what I thought to be a pretty good idea about how is it that we can improve the consistency and the performances of the referees. So would you like to share your idea with the audience, the Rugby Unity audience?
Well, I think the first thing is, just to be clear, I don't think the referees are the problem. I think it's the administration of the referees. I think it's the clarity in which World Rugby wants the game to go. I think World Rugby's got one responsibility in the world, to make sure there's a clear pathway for how we want the game to go. And apart from organising the World Cup, and I think at the moment they're asking the referees to do far too much. Their use of technology is not clear enough. And we've got, you know, as we said last time, we've got some referees who now second-guess every decision because they want the clarity from the TMO. So I don't see the problem with the referees or refereeing. So I think we want to be really clear about that. The problem is the administration of the referees and the direction of the game. So if you look historically over the last 10 years, we've had the same problems, and the same problems keep rising up. And the periods where we've probably had the best refereeing and the most consistent refereeing has been at the World Cup. And the World Cup is the only time where the referees are really under the banner of World Rugby, because in all other circumstances, such as now, they're being borrowed from their union to use in these championship or championship games, you know, Pacific Nations or Rugby Championship or even Six Nations. So wouldn't it make sense then if World Rugby centralised the contract of the 15 or 16 top referees? It's obviously going to cost them money to do that because they're going to have to pay them. But have the 15 or 16 referees work together under the one referee administrator, under the one referee coach, under the one advisory panel, So they're getting a consistent message. Because at the moment, if a referees in a rugby championship game, he gets a critique from World Rugby, then I'm sure he gets a critique from his own national union, which sometimes could be different. So centralise the contracting of the 16 best referees and we'll solve the problem.
I think it's an outstanding idea. And really, when you think of what that would cost, it's not really, in the greater scheme of things, a huge amount of money. If they were paid 200, 250,000, 300,000 each, that in the greater scheme of, the amounts of money that are generated by World Rugby, that is insignificant. And the benefits that would come from that consistency, that simplicity, I think it's a great idea. So there we go. We have promised on Rugby Unity from the very beginning that when we identify problems, we do have to identify a solution. And so let us know what you think. Do you think that that is a good idea? And that could be something, well, it certainly will be something that we do share with World Rugby because we know that they are listening. So let's put that on the table for consideration because we have to do something because we can't get to the end of every weekend and have another conversation about what is wrong with the refereeing of the game. So good thinking there by Eddie Jones. So listen, let's get to the games. The Rugby Championship starts again this weekend. The first match, the Wallabies versus the All Blacks at a sold-out stadium in Perth. The Wallabies have made 5 changes. Dangunu comes in on the left wing. Alan Alalatoa starts at tight head prop. Edmed and Gordon are in the halves. And big Will Skelton returns from France. Valentini, Fluke, James O'Connor and Brendan Nasser are among the bench. The referee will be Matthew Carley from the RFU. For the All Blacks, there's been 6 changes. Scott Barrett returns. Peter Lackey starts at 8. Tamaiti Williams and Fletcher Newell into the front row. Lester Feinberg-Mngomezulu starts his first test match since 2023. And Tupaya starts at 13. And a range of players are unavailable, including Terrell Lomax and Bowden Barrett through injury. They have stayed at home. So, Eddie Jones, you look at those 2 teams. What are your first thoughts?
There's a couple of things. Most of the games have gone win-loss. Yeah, in the 2 games that they've played against each other. So, will this round be different than the previous rounds in terms of that win-loss? I think New Zealand, Australia in Perth, it always seems to lack atmosphere a game over there for some reason. And maybe it's just a perception, but it always seems to be a little bit of a downer from tests in the more traditional centres, and maybe that's a biased view. So take that into consideration. New Zealand will feel relieved at having won the Beslow Cup. There's no doubt about that. There was a fair bit of pressure on to win that first game. Scott Robinson's probably feeling a little bit more at ease. So you've got New Zealand potentially a little bit more vulnerable because of that. But then you've got the Aussies who have been in every game, and as we've spoken about, they've shown a lot of fight, a lot of resilience, but still have not a great winning record at the moment. They've won 3 of 8 games, which is on paper is not fantastic, but they've displayed a lot of resilience, a lot of good attributes, stayed in the fight, kept showing up, been in contention to win a lot of games. Carling, the referee, is a good guy, speaks well to the players. What's the strength of his game? Probably his player management. He's a good guy, and he's doesn't want to be the biggest show on earth. He doesn't want to be singing at the head of the choir. He's happy to just be part of the show. So I think he'll referee the game pretty well. He's done really well for a guy who started off in the premiership. So I think he'll referee a pretty good game. He'll be fairly consistent. So he should get the game in good shape. So I'm struggling to see which team's got the advantage here. I think Australia will be at it. And the other thing, consistent thing, I think, apart from the inconsistency in terms of win and loss, is the great change we're seeing from game to game in the selection, that we're seeing regularly 5 or 6 players change, which in a game of rugby, if you listen to the great Ben Darwin, he's 100% right on, cohesion, such a big part of playing rugby well. And when you're getting 5 or 6 changes in a week where you're flying from Auckland to Perth, so you're losing a full day of travel. That's a full day of travel. So you're probably on your Monday, you're doing a little bit of work in your running shoes. The players still be sore. You've only got 2 days of training, which means you've got maybe 3 hours of training to put 5 or 6 new players in, albeit most of those players have been in the squad, but still to get that cohesion. So it's which team can find its cohesion first. They both got 5 or 6 changes. McKenzie's playing 10 for the All Blacks.
Yes.
Yeah, so
he is.
He's a wonderful player. He's one of those players that you want in your squad, but he just hasn't been able to nail down either a position at 10 or 15, but he's capable of very good performance. So I think if they get some front ball early and McKenzie gets a bit of space, this could be his game. And again at Perth, the perception is it's quite an open ground. It's fast. There's plenty of space. So he might get a little bit of a run along early. They might get some quick balls, some tries early. But I think, the thing about Australia, as we've said, they'll stay in the game. Skelton coming back, I think this will be a difficult game for him. I think the other games he's done really well, but I just think, coming back from France just for 1 week, flying from Sydney to Perth, it might be a difficult game for him to impact. And as you know, I think he's an exceptional player. So I think New Zealand might get away to a good start, and that might be enough for him to win it.
But Skelton's impacts are not just, as you've mentioned a number of times before, and you selected him obviously in 2023 as the captain of the team. What sort of impact do you think that he has? Clearly on the field he's going to have an impact, but off the field, how, when he arrives into the side, how does he have that influence, and what sort of influence would he have had this week with the team? Because it's a fair demonstration of commitment and passion and love for the Wallaby jersey to want to fly from the Northern Hemisphere for the Southern Hemisphere just to play in this match.
Yeah, no, well, he's just one of those guys people like being around. He talks sense when he talks about the game. For those players who need a bit of encouragement, he knows how to encourage them. Like Tupou, for one, will benefit from him being there. Tupou probably the last couple of games has been a little bit below his best, and I think he'll benefit from Will there. Will might take him to the gym in the morning, do a bit of extra aerobic work with him, just makes him feel good. He'll do something for the forwards on the game before the day, go out and buy, the best chocolate chip cookies or whatever they're into for that day. And he's just one of those guys that makes people feel better. And also his physical presence, mate. If you're playing with a bloke who's, 6'8", 150 Ks, he's probably 155 now with all the extra baguettes he's had back at La Rochelle. You're happy when he hits someone. You don't mind following him through, and that still matters in the game. Like a big physical presence in the middle of the ruck still makes a hell of a difference. So he'll be around that ruck area, but I just think I've seen it before with players just coming back from a 1 week flying from Northern Hemisphere to Southern Hemisphere. It's much harder for them to have an impact in the game. But sure, he'll do some good stuff off the field.
Yeah. So in the halves, obviously Ed Med and Gordon, and feeding the back line, we have Joseph Akuso Suoliti again with Ikitau in the centres, Ed Med and Gordon. What's your assessment of the Wallaby backline at the moment, and how might it change with that new combination sitting there of Gordon and Ed Med starting at 9 and 10?
The differentiation between forwards and backs is almost academic. Like you have a look at the majority of Australians attack, because we've obviously watched a little bit of them. Most of their attacks one pass rugby, and they play within, as we've spoken about before, generally within half the pitch. And so you've got, particularly Ikitau plays like a ninth forward. You look at his most damaging work, it's all been one pass off the ruck, around driving walls where he's made a difference. And, I think one of the listeners wasn't impressed that we didn't give him enough of a rap. Well, he's been impressive, Ikitau, and he's got great footwork. He's strong through the contact, gets you quick ruck ball, but he basically plays like a ninth forward now. Then you've got the 8 forwards. You've got Ikitau as virtually the ninth forward. Then you've got your 9 and 10. And when have you ever seen the 15 in Australia chiming in the line, making extra man? That doesn't happen. So we've got to talk about what we're actually looking at. So, and then Sawali at 13, only gets the ball when they see the opportunity that the defence is compressed hard in half the field. Then they shift the ball through 2 or 3 passes, and Sawali gets his hands on the ball, where he's enormously dangerous one-on-one. The question was, what do I think of the Australian backline? Well, I don't think there is a backline. I think you've got an attack force of about 9 players, as we've spoken about. Then we've got a swinging attack that opens up, and when they do swing, and it's one of the things O'Connor's done so well for Australia, and that's why when he's played, Australia's tended to play a little bit better, I think, because he's very good at seeing the opportunities to swing because of his experience, and he sits back a lot. When he goes, it's generally on, and he's made good decisions about that. I'm not so sure, and I'm not saying this as being critical of Ed Med, that he's got the same ability to see those opportunities. I'm just not sure. I haven't seen enough of him play this particular attacking system to make a judgment on him. I can't say too much about the back line.
But what's your assessment then? Rassie Erasmus did say a few weeks ago about Australia, his observation was that it wasn't going to be a style of rugby that was going to be, he didn't believe it was going to be effective, looking towards the 2027 Rugby World Cup. What, having had a look at the Australians play now through the Rugby Championship, what is your view of the way that their game is evolving, and is it going to be effective in your view?
Well, he's bloody good, Russie, isn't he? He's got inside your head, hey?
Well, he is.
Well, as I said, I think Australia have improved enormously, and I think if you look how competitive they are playing this style of rugby, why can't they get better at playing this style of rugby? Like, look what South Africa. Everyone's saying South Africa plays a different style of rugby. Well, yes, they do when they get turnover ball. But you have a look what they've done over the last period of time. They've basically gone back to Springbok Rugby 101. Smash the ball up from the line out, goes back to 10 or stays at 9, depending on which side of the field. Ball goes up in the air into this half-field bomb. And when I say half-field bomb, they kick between the 2 lines of defence, so it makes it a congested catch. The old traditional high ball back on the back line, the last defenders, the second line of defenders is almost a relic of the past. The old Michael Liner bomb to the fullback. Well, now the ball generally goes in between the 2 lines. So now you've got the backfield guy coming hard into a contest. You've got your runners chasing hard from an onside position, and you get this clatter in between the 2 lines. They get turnover ball and then they play, right? That's why South Africa have done so well over the last test, because they've gone back to that. How many times over the last 3 tests have you seen these convoluted 3-phase plays from South Africa? They've gone out the window, mate, right? No one's lifting a jumper, trying to stick the ball up his backside. All that sort of thing's just gone out the window now. So it's back to smash the ball up, kick high, chase, and then when we've got it now, we've got some talent to spread the ball. So is that going to win the next World Cup?
I don't know.
Oh, you better ask Russ.
Maybe. They've got, the thing that they do have, the South Africans, and we'll come to them in a moment, but they've got plenty of talent and a production line just coming. But anyway, yeah, go on.
The point I'm making here is that the secret to coaching a team well is working out what you've got in terms of your talent and your strengths of your players, and then maximising those talents and strengths. Now, is that good enough to win a World Cup? Well, you don't know. Yeah. You don't know. But all you can do is coach your players to their strengths. And I think Joe Smith's doing a wonderful job with Australia, and I think Rassie does an absolutely superb job with the Springboks. But to critique styles of play, I think, is almost you're putting yourself above what that coach knows is successful for his team. Like no one knows the Australian team better than Joe now. No one knows the South African team better than Rassie. And they're coaching their two teams to their best. And it's easy. Rassie's just trying to get inside Joe's head because he wants him to pass the ball more. Because the more you pass the ball against South Africa, the more time they've got to get off the line and smash you, which is what they want. So, I think Australia's got a really good style of game. Can they evolve their game? Like every team, you have to evolve. And sometimes you've got to go backwards to go forwards like South Africa had. So South Africa went to the three-phase, much more prettier style rugby, and it didn't work, right? So they've gone back to their more one-on-one rugby with a different set of players that can play off the unstructured game.
All right. Well, listen. Let's have a prediction then about that match in Perth. Who do you think gets there on the weekend? As you were talking, I was sort of looking at it, looking at just trying to get a vibe from you, and it's sort of like a bit like last week where you felt you didn't have really a clear view on it. But this week, what you're thinking? All Blacks maybe.
Again, I don't have a really good feel of it, but I think New Zealand might get enough points at the start of the game to win it.
Okay. Very good. And then we head to London. The Springboks take on Argentina. It's the home match for the Argentinians. The Argentinian Rugby Union has taken the game to London. The Springboks only one change. Ox Nietzsche is in for Boan Venter, whereas Felipe Contepomi has made 9 changes to his side. Among the changes, new half pairing in Benitez Cruz and Prisciantelli. He's replaced his locks. Santiago Carreras has gone from 10 to 15. And Contepomi has really, said during the week that they've had some real cause and pause for self-reflection, not very happy at all with the performance, or the second half performance really, against the Springboks in Durban. South Africa have an 87% win record against Argentina, and the match will be refereed by the Italian Andrea Piardi. So, Eddie Jones, again, your first thoughts when you look to those two teams, match to be played at Twickenham. The weather is supposed to be pretty good, and clearly there are a lot of South Africans who live in London, so it could well be more like a home game for the South Africans than certainly for the Argentinian side. So your thoughts on this particular match?
So again, if you look at the context of the game, both teams travelling from South Africa, Durban to London, so they've got a short preparation week. South Africa are the opposite of all the other three teams. They've got no changes to their team. They've only got Ox coming back, who's their normal starting loose head. So they've got a nice settled team, be very clear about how they want to play, be able to keep the players fresh enough. So South Africa traditionally train Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday off. They'll be at what's the course there in London? They'll be playing golf all around the place, relaxing. They'll be relaxing. Friday, a nice, easy captain's run. So they're going to be full of beans. They'll come out. There'll be 40,000 South Africans there. I think South Africa might win this pretty easily. They might go away. And the championship's on the line from and Argentina, a lot of changes as Contaponi said, they've probably reflected a lot on their game. They'll definitely compete hard as they always do, but I think it might be a pretty comprehensive victory for South Africa here.
Yeah, I certainly I tend to agree with you on this one. Well, anyway, we will wait and see, and it'd be great for the game to be able to see Argentina compete, but it's been a long tour for them. They've been away from home for a long time, and I'm sure looking forward to heading home. Okay, well, listen, just before we go, R360, the announcement, or there's not been an announcement, but the news is out this week that the correspondence with the agents, certainly into Australia, around, and it's really come out of the rugby league agents talking about receiving these letters which saying that the tournament will start in October of 2026. Eddie Jones, do you have any news about that? Do you know anything else about that? The start of R360?
Well, all the news seems to be coming out of NRL, which is interesting. In their biggest week of the year, their grand final, they even want to take news away from rugby, and they run a clever PR campaign. The NRL, the head of the NRL, what's his name, the horse guy. He was, he's front and
Peter V'landys.
Yeah, he's front and station there,
but he's not happy. He's not happy about this thing raining on his parade because he doesn't want to be talking about R360 in the week of the Rugby League Grand Final. And I tend to agree with you that it is coming out of the rugby league agents. But certainly there does seem to be a little bit more detail about R360, that it will start next year, 2026, 6 men's teams, 4 women's teams, franchises in London, Miami, Tokyo, Dubai, Boston, Cape Town, Lisbon, Madrid. That the players will be registered via the United Arab Emirates Rugby Union. So there does appear to be a little bit more detail, but again, it's like wrestling with a column of smoke because nobody's coming out and fronting this thing. It's sort of dribbling out. And as you say, Eddie Jones, it's coming back via the rugby league networks. And it's certainly exercising the minds of the rugby league people, but you don't have any further detail? That you don't have any further understanding?
I think the players had to commit to a letter of intent, and that's why I think the news has come out in NRL that there needed to be some sort of extra commitment this week to the contract situation where they had a letter of intent, and now it's become a bit more serious, and apparently it has become more serious. But if you just look at the news that are coming out, a small tournament in October 2026, and then how are they going to play it in 2027 with the World Cup starting? Like when would players have time to play that? So the players would have to opt out of the traditional rugby structure to play R360 in 2027, which would rule them out of the World Cup. Now, not many players are going to do that. Rugby players. Like, tell me a rugby player that's going to do that, unless they're going to pay him like three or 4 times what their normal salary is. If they can do that, good luck to them. It could be something very interesting for rugby.
Yeah, anyway, I'm just looking for a little bit more detail. I might come to this in a moment with Ewen McKenzie. But just before you go, Eddie, obviously big preparation now. A few weeks leading up to the game against Australia. What's planned? What's going to happen between now and then? Because certainly there'll be great expectation, a big crowd in Tokyo. Really, it's going to be, such an exciting occasion for rugby. What's your plans? What's going to happen between now and then?
So we go into camp on Sunday, have a 3-day backs and forwards camp. So the forwards go away and scrum and line out, and the backs go away and work on their execution under pressure. Then we come together. We've got an Australia A game. So some of the players may play in that game for Japan 15 versus Australia A. And then, we've got a good 2 weeks preparation for the Australian game. So, when you've got a 2-week preparation, you can tactically do things a little bit differently. So we've got some ideas what we need to do to make Australia a bit uncomfortable. So we'll have a look at a few things there and get ourselves ready, mate. You know, it's
Do you have all your players?
Apart from injuries, yeah, we'll be as well stocked. And we've got a few new guys who've just become eligible. So, yeah, we're down to like 2 fit locks now. We've got 5 locks, so that makes things a bit more livable.
And there's a couple of Australian boys, I believe, who've now qualified for Japan.
Yeah, Hocking's the Queensland Reds, you know, who left during the COVID period. He's been up here playing for Suntory, so he becomes eligible for the Wales test. So we'll bring him into camp,
Okay.
Get him ready, you know, because he's been playing at League One level for a long time, so he'll need to get himself ready for a much higher level of rugby.
And any others? Who else might qualify for this game against Australia?
That's it. We've got 2 South Africans, mate. Van Zeeland and Tyler Paul, who played for the Sharks. Both of them are good, strong, solid players, which will just add a bit more depth to our squad, which is good.
Okay, so that's a lot to look forward to. It's certainly going to be a big occasion. And the big news is, ladies and gentlemen, and Rugby Unity community, we, in fact, are going to be taking Rugby Unity on the road. And so we will be in Japan for the week of the match between Australia and Japan. We'll be speaking to a range of people in Japan about the mission of how do we help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world, but we'll be doing it through the eyes of the Japanese rugby community. So we'll be asking questions and spending time with a lot of the influential people in Japanese rugby and understanding just exactly where they see themselves in the future of rugby and how they can contribute, as they are now the 3rd largest economy, rugby economy in the world. So I'm certainly looking forward to bringing you a lot of content actually during that week. So that will be something to look forward to. So Eddie Jones, we will let you get back to your day job. Ewen McKenzie, the cows are in. So we'll say goodbye to Eddie Jones and hello to Ewen McKenzie.
We're not talking rugby, we're building it. Rugby Unity.
How are you, my friend? And how are the cows?
I'm good, mate. Good. Yeah, no, they're right. They're right. It's a bit wet outside. It's been wetter in October than it has been in September. So
okay,
it's not getting better.
Okay.
How are you going, mate? I was listening to you there, mate. You're on the junket, are you? So when you say Rugby Unity is on the road, you're on the road. The rest of us are still back here in the studio. That's what you're really saying.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true.
That's
but
true,
no,
yeah.
I'm going. And I've been in contact with Steve Hansen and Will Genia, and Eddie's introduced me to some other Koji Tokamatsu, another influential person, Glenn Delaney. So there are a lot of people who talk up there, and I just don't think we know enough about
It's amazing how many people are up there. You go like Robbie Deans and all these, terrific coaches are all up there plying their trade, been up there for a long time. So you're right. We don't, as much as you try and keep tabs on what's happening, they don't really have an understanding of it. But it's clearly quite not complex, but it's quite a significant operation that goes on. And there's a lot of talented players and coaches up there who would have a perspective looking back at what their respective countries and what's going on and from a world context, because they seem to just, I don't know, they seem to miss the media, or the media seems to miss that what goes on in that part of the world. And that's this upcoming test match will be great. It's a great opportunity for Japan to maybe spring a surprise on the Wallabies. I don't know. That'll be a real test for the Wallabies. Do they put their number one side out there? Do they give a few guys a go, etc.? You can see how that could catch you out, if you run different combinations, although they've been running different combinations every week. It'll be an interesting game. I'm looking forward to that one.
I think that will be, I think it's an Eddie Jones special myself.
No,
I think
right.
he would have put this in the calendar. And the fact that he's just dropped the fact that he's now got 2 South African locks by the sounds of things, that he's been tucked away in the corner.
Dealing with the Wallabies sort of direct play, we've seen that in been effectively deployed in the last 4 or 5 tests. That's a challenge. And obviously, defending driving lineouts and things like that, mauls and etc. That's a challenge. But the strategy that I've seen on display in the Pacific Cup, that's what they've been able to deploy, the variety in the game, the tempo of the game, all that stuff makes it very interesting. Their scrum's been really good, and they're very, very efficient but unpredictable. So I think that's all. Given they've got a 4-week preparation, that's pretty good for them to be able to really get the things in the right spots. Eddie will have everything sorted. It's just a question of what happens on the day, whether they can, defend when they have to defend, but also I think on the attack side they'll be pretty hard to handle.
And then there's of course the wider context of Australia v Eddie Jones post 2023.
I'm sure that's one of the reasons you're up there. You'll be feeding some stories back. The media loves that sort of stuff, so everyone will be talking about that aspect. But I know Eddie. He'll just see this as another game to try and conjure a win. That's what he's about. He spends every week trying to conjure the next win, and he's had some famous wins along the way. And he'll be eyeing this, but he won't be eyeing it anymore. He'll be building to the World Cup, building. As he said, he's building the player depth already. He's already, there's 3 players he's mentioned already that'll come in and bolster the stocks for the next couple of years. So, that's all good. That's what he does.
And I was talking to someone up in Japan the other day, and I think there's more to come. I think by the time that the Japanese team arrive in Australia in 2027, there are going to be quite a few Australian players who've qualified, and also a number of other South African players as well. So, I think they're going to be, they're going to be a very interesting side by the time they get to the 2027 Rugby World Cup Japan.
Eddie's just mentioned the getting the players into the national program so they can get them up to speed with the pace of international football. So I don't know the difference. I don't know enough about it to know the difference between the league standard and the national standard, but he'll be taking that under his own care to make sure that the players are prepared. Not every player that goes up there, if they'd stayed in their national union would have played for their country, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't stop them being good players. It doesn't stop them being better players in a professional program, which they would have been in their club environments. And also, Eddie runs a pretty tight ship, so they'll get the best. They'll squeeze the lemons there pretty hard to get the best out of all of those players. So it's about depth. You're right. And so the smaller nations, it's about depth. And when you think about it laterally, one of the things that Japan has is they've got a lot of good players and a lot of good coaches. You got to remember all the other Robbie Deans of the world. They're all the Hansons. They're all coaching these players, at the club level. So they're getting good grounding, good fundamentals. So that's a really good environment to be able to conjure up a pretty good national side. I think the problem's is always going to be depth and just physical size, and they're obviously blending that now with other eligible players and whatever. So it's an exciting. It's the perfect scenario for Eddie into the next World Cup. I think it's the perfect scenario for him to be able to use all the tools at his disposal. You got to remember he's come off coaching the England. There's no bigger budget than the England budget, right? So as a coach, that would have been perfect for him to have all of those tools and the financial ability to do stuff. When he went to the Wallaby setup, the money's not there. So, but he'd still want to. You can't help yourself but want to run the program as the program as you would know the best program could possibly be. So when they talk about overspend and things like he would be trying to run that program as best as he possibly can. And you wouldn't be thinking, when you only got a year or something to prepare, not even that, you're not thinking about the budget. You're thinking about getting the best preparation possible in the shortest space of time. And I think that's got lost on a lot of people. that he knew what resources he could have had, he knew what resources he had, and you're trying to make the best of that in a very short space of time. But that's in the past. Now Joe's been doing good work, and see what the weekend brings.
And anyway, we will see how that all, I do think there has been a bit of a softening of the attitude towards Eddie as time, heals, and people do reflect on what in fact took place. And again, I think, you've made the point, around a number of the players. And I was in fact talking to George Gregan yesterday about something else. And he was making the point about the opportunity, we're now seeing, Jorgensen, Hooper, Fraser McCright. These are the players that Eddie did give the opportunity in 2023. And lo and behold, we arrived now in 2025, and they are now, because they now have the miles on the clock, so to speak, that they're now turning into formidable international footballers.
Yeah, well, Tupa's on the bench this week, but he's been starting in all of the significant games of late. And Skelton's influence, no one questions anymore. But when Eddie picked him and made him captain, everyone sort of thought the world had ended, or what's going on. So it was all sort of bucketed as strange. But those guys are proved to be indispensable, and Joe's been using them in the same manner that Eddie would want to have used. Unfortunately, they were injured against Fiji. They were unavailable for those two games, and that's where the World Cup turned. It wasn't, no question, it wasn't terrific, but you're working with guys, the Hoopers and the McWrights, and these guys are all 2-3 years younger at the time. And so they're much more Jorgensen. They're all young guys that he pumped. So he went for a young side, and sometimes you pay the price for that. But Australia's getting the benefit of it now. He didn't have Suali available, but he actually, I'm pretty sure he was involved in the negotiations to get him on board. So
he and Hamish McLennan.
Yes, and neither of those guys are in Australian rugby anymore, but everyone's patting Suali on the back. But the guys that got him there are not actually in Australian rugby anymore. So, some of the detail gets forgotten.
Well, it's true, and I think that's, in Hamish McLennan's defence as well. A lot of the decisions that were made back in his time are the decisions that have now led to, the greater financial stability, like the agreement with the Lions around the revenue sharing, the taking on of the debt to be able to cover post the COVID period, the planning around the Lions series. So we do tend to forget pretty quickly, but anyway, those decisions were taken at that time, and they are continuing to derive benefit. And I don't think anyone in any form would say that Joseph Akuso-Suaalii hasn't been an absolutely outstanding recruit and worth whatever they paid him. He's worth about 5 times that.
I'd like him to touch the ball more because he's a difficult customer to handle. So I'd like to get the ball in his hands more. I think that's one of the things early in the game. If I look back and reflect, early in the game for the Wallabies, he doesn't get touches in attack until about the 30th minute or 30th minute, roughly on average. So he doesn't get an opportunity to actually impose himself in attack. Yeah, defence, whatever. But that's one of the things that I'd be trying to get him in the game earlier. That's where for me, a kickoff where you're kicking off to him is where he gets a chance to chase and maybe get up and knock the ball back, and like South Africans do, and you get to play off that contested possession. That you can do that from the first kickoff. In the first 10 seconds of the game, he could be in the game. So that's I feel it. And the rest of the team rides on the back of his creativity and his power and his poise in the when he's got the ball. So that's, you try and get him to touch it as early as possible, feel like he's in the game straight up, rather than sort of 25 minutes later. That's one of the things I think to help Australia get a faster start. Love to see him do something like that against the All Blacks.
Well, interestingly, and we'll come to that All Black game, Wallabies All Blacks in Perth. this weekend. But we've just finished a conversation with Eddie Jones about the Australian backline, and he said, well, Australia doesn't really have a backline. It's all one-pass rugby, and so we can't really talk about, the backline, the fullback coming into the line, the passing to the outside centre to get that, off early phase play. And that's pretty much precisely what you're talking about, isn't it? That there's just not those opportunities that are provided, and that's, someone like Ikitau at 12 is playing like a ninth forward, and that's the way that the Australian team are attacking at the moment.
I don't want that. It's not a criticism, because the beauty of rugby is you can play it many different ways, and Australia's got good pay out of zigzagging their forwards up the field and playing to the short side, and then using the likes of Ikitau. And if you remember, they even used Tizano at 12 in one of the tests later in the game, and no one even noticed that there was a change because the structure of the game didn't change. You had him playing as a 12, punching the ball up and then trying to play off the front foot from there. And a lot of the opportunities, a lot of the X factor we've seen has come from, we've seen Suali's intercept, we've seen Jorgensen create tries out of nothing, but they've been individual moments of flair, the same as Feinberg. Sacha Feinberg does the same for South Africa. They create those individual moments of brilliance. The two tries last weekend for South Africa that were really creative was him doing something X factor. The rest of it was really this traditional South African play. So, it is a bit one pass, but it's been working for them broadly. You got to think that you got to try and get a little bit more out of that, a little bit more to try and ice some of the win-win-win scenarios rather than sort of win-loss against the better teams.
So you've seen both the teams. We've introduced those teams to the audience a little bit earlier in the program. So what's your assessment, and what are perhaps the three things that you'd be looking for in the match this weekend between the Wallabies and the All Blacks?
Well, I don't think that, Skelton was advertised early on, so we knew he was coming into the team. So the forward packs, it's a good forward pack they've got there. I think that in the end, a good player was going to be on the bench. Valentini's ended up there. I thought Sololotta he played well last week, but he's not even in the 23. So you've got that. There's always I always have a feeling that there's the players that he came into the side. Everyone's been talking about him for some time as a replacement for Skelton. He came in, got a start. I thought he played all right, and then he's gone out again. So there's got to be somewhere in the background where those sorts of things just a little bit mysterious to me. Obviously, conversations would be had, so the players probably not left it in some sort of state of not knowing what's going on, but it just seems that way a little bit from the outside at times. But forward pack good. Jake Gordon, it might be short of a run, so the 9-10 has the changes every week. Danganu on the wing, the rest of it's the same. So I don't know. I think and the All Blacks, there are a lot of changes at the All Blacks side, which worries me.
6 changes.
I worry about the line out. I think we've talked about it in the past. I think Holland's been a really good contributor in that area, and to not have him in the starting pack. But I don't know. To lose both your props is unusual in a test match, but they've got pretty good guys coming in there. I mean, better probably scrummages, but around the park, Tamati Williams is very difficult customer close to the line. Fletcher Newell's is just a strong man and be good at scrum time, and so there's a bit of X factor. Funganuku on the wing, I like, and Leroy Carr. These guys are doing well. Roy Guard's still there, so that's important. So Damien McKenzie's the question. We know he can goal kick, and that it's just a question under pressure. If they get in his face, whether he drops back, and we have the issue where they're not getting across the advantage line, which is something we've been talking about the last few weeks. So I'm looking at the teams. There's changes on both sides. That could be an excuse for failure or whatever, but they're all good players that are coming in. So I like the look of I think the bench for Australia, if I'm looking for a difference on selection, the bench for Australia looks like it could have more impact than maybe New Zealand. So the end of the game could be good for Australia, but you'd like to think Australia can get out better and therefore the end's not so important. So I like the look of Australia, the finishing side. In terms of the tactics, well, it's aerial game again. I think line-out will be important. I think the line-out battle swings Australia's way. I think Australia will put some pressure on New Zealand there, or certainly be trying to, and that'll make a difference in the overall game. And then it's just down to the breakdown again. So it's I think with Skelton there, everyone knows how Australia's going to play. So it's a question of how well New Zealand defends that.
So, Ewen McKenzie, with all that said, who do you think will win the final match of the Rugby Championship in Australia?
I think it might be a little bit more high scoring, but I'm tipping the Wallabies. I think the Wallabies will get there, just on the strength of the guys coming into the game in the last portion. So I don't think there'll be much in it, but I think Australia might just squeak it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. A sold out Optus Stadium, dry conditions, and Matthew Carley, the referee from the RFU. The second match of the Rugby Championship will be played in London between Argentina and South Africa. Again, we've introduced to the audience just exactly what those teams are going to look like. Eddie Jones believes that this could be a comfortable win to South Africa at Twickenham. What is your belief, Ewen McKenzie?
Yeah, I'm the same. I heard Eddie's comments. I think he's right. I think South Africa's got everything to play for. They've got a settled team. I think Rassie's now worked his magic, and he's got the X factor guys into his back line, and he's got the forward pack playing how they know how to play and do well. And so, you've got the really good combination of muscle and flair. So I think that'll be enough. And the fact that they started poorly in the tournament, they'll want to finish it, make sure that they get the trophy and the accolades to go with that. So Argentina's been a long haul for them, so it's hard to I know they've shuffled the deck chairs, but I don't think that'll be enough. I think South Africa will be too powerful, and this I don't know that they're back to a situation now where those guys that are starting, there's been a bit of shuffling of the deck with players. The ones that are out there now, they want to make sure that they're now the starting. They're now recognised as the starting players. He's shuffled the combination, second row, a little bit in the front row, but more second row, back row, etc. So now he'll want to make sure that and the backs a lot in the back line. He'll want to make sure these guys all want to make sure they ice their spot and stay there as the first selected players, in a very hotly contested squad environment.
It's certainly looking to November. There's a lot of fantastic test matches to look forward to, but one in particular, the Springboks versus France. That will be worth watching. That will be, and there is so much, some great contests later in the year.
Yeah, there's some real contrast in the football styles there too. So that'll be a really interesting game. I always look forward. Anyone France is playing is a challenge. They're not so good on the road, but when you're playing them at home in Paris, it's tough work. It's a tough night. So and they've been a pretty consistent side under Galtier. So I look forward to that one. That's in the calendar already.
Yeah. Indeed. Now, listen, I do want to ask you about R360, and I know that you're only looking on from afar, but I do want to talk about that in a little bit more detail and probably bring some context around sort of the journey of the sport into professionalism. But before we get to that, I just want to put a few questions to you and comments from the third voice here at Rugby Unity. And a big thanks, everyone, please, for continuing to send through your comments and your questions. We do like to feature them as much as we possibly can because it is important. It helps to enrich the program. So please keep them coming. And we'll get to as many as we can, but there are too many to answer in one program. But the first one, Ewen McKenzie, you mentioned that Bob Dwyer also spoke about, having a number of players in a World 15. Who are the current Wallabies who you would put in contention for a World 15? In Ben Clark's opinion, he would put Wright, Ikitau, Joseph Akuso Suali'i, Skelton, Fraser McCright, Jorgensen, Valentini, Bell and Frost. That is a pretty decent list, but who would you, Ewen McKenzie, if you're looking at the Australian team at the moment, who would you put in a top World 15?
There's a lot of good players in the Australian team. You've got to say, but you have to look at all the other teams and say, well, who have they got? So I think Suali could be there, X factor. But as a 13, is there anyone better out there playing more traditionally than he does? But I think Suali could be in there, especially if there was a bench spot maybe. Valentini for me is a guy that could be in a World 15. I think he's a guy that it's not just about a guy that could play one game at that level. It's about being able to play consistently at that level, and he's been a really consistent performer for me. I think there's some other players who are heading in the right direction. I don't know if they'd be in the team right yet, but the likes of your Jorgensens and your McWrights, Tupu, I think should have been a World 15 player for the last 4 or 5 years, but for whatever reason, I don't know. He should have been a guy that could have been in there. I don't say he's there now, but it could have been in that space. I think someone like Pollard's got the potential to be there. There's just a handful of guys there off the top of my head without thinking about it too much. I think the other positions have chopped and changed too much. Frost is really starting to develop as a really important player. I've rated him for some time as a line-out manager and whatever, but he's the second row position's been changed a lot over the last few years, and I think that he's a guy that could come in contention. And Hooper's probably the one that, for me, is made the most rapid progress. And I'm not surprised. I really rated him a couple of years ago when Eddie was picking him at open side. I just think he's got the right ingredients. So he's a guy I think will come into those conversations in the future. So there's probably one or two at the moment, but there's definitely another maybe 4 or 5 that could come into contention. That's what you need by the time you get to the World Cup. You want to have 5 or 6 guys who are, if you're picking a World 15, they're at least in the top 3. You've got to have guys that are in that conversation. Whereas I don't know that would have been the case a few years ago. We wouldn't have had too many people we'd be talking about.
All right. So another question from Kieran. He asks, should rugby competitions be reorganised by time zone rather than the traditional north-south divide? So, for example, New Zealand, Australia, Fiji and Japan together, South Africa in the Six Nations, and Argentina with the Americas. What are your thoughts about that, Ewen McKenzie?
Well, that would solve some logistical issues, but you've got to look at the relative strengths of the teams. I mean, Argentina would dominate that competition, in the Americas, so they just dominate it. So that would be it'd be difficult for them to grow. South Africa's already playing in the Northern Hemisphere competition in terms of its provincial rugby anyway, so they're already in there. They've already recognised the time zone upside there. And Australia, with Japan, Pacific, yes, New Zealand. So in a way, we already sort of are aligned up that way a little bit. Maybe not so much for test matches, but test matches are about playing, different teams at different times. So I think provincially it is lined up that way to some extent. It's probably only Argentina that plays outside its real zone. And then it's just a question of other teams to try and push into the top 10 mix, and we're starting to see that with the World Cup qualification process, how the teams numbers 11 to 20 are suddenly becoming a bit more, not want to say relevant, more known in terms of what's going on and how they're faring. We talked about Chile last week, and last couple of weeks we've talked about that. So we're starting to get a better feel in soccer. They always, the top 30 teams in the world and the top 30 teams in the world are well known, but in rugby it tends to be the top 6 that get talked about, top 10 maybe. So it's the 11 to 20. We've got to try and bring them out into the public realm and get their identities better known and have the fight for those positions more interesting and relevant. You shouldn't be ashamed to be number 11, 12, 13 in the world in rugby. Like, it's a pretty competitive. There's a lot of teams that play, so to be at that level, if the Socceroos or something were number 11, everyone would be happy as Larry, So, so I think we've got to think about it in that context. We've got to try and get rugby to recognise more about the value of those 11 to 20 teams and what they contribute and how they can contribute, and try and get them to contribute more in a way that people know who they are.
Yeah. Exactly, and we will here at Rugby Unity, as we do,
play
our part in.
That's a really competitive 10 teams there. Well, the order of that can change a lot, and that's where there's a lot of upside and downside there for them. So, I think that's a really interesting. And we've seen a few of those teams, the sort of Portugals and whatever, starting the Romanias, and they're starting to feature in the World Cup and stuff. So you get to know them. You get to know a few of the players, and so you suddenly feel a little bit more connected. I think we've got to try and connect with those more and try and get the volume of teams that play in rugby to be more, everyone to be more cognizant of that, rather than just the same old 5 or 6 teams that play. And that's what
well, certainly about. that is part of the mission of Rugby Unity, is that we do, as we say, help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. It will come in the growth of those areas. Spain is another country where rugby is on the move. And as we head into the November series, there are a lot of matches that are being played between. I saw online, I think it was on Reddit yesterday, I think Spain are playing Ireland A and Spain are playing England A. In matches coming up. So, again, we want to talk about that, put some focus on that, and encourage people around the world to be more interested in their national teams and their performance. So, a couple more questions before we get to R360. Mamia Lam Amiala asks, Ewen, are you ever going back to coaching? They keep asking this question, Ewan. I don't think they're not satisfied with your answer.
No one from R360 is contacting me, so I won't be popping up in Saudi Arabia or New York or something like that. You won't see me there. No, I don't. No. I think I'll just I'll bide my time talking to you guys.
Okay. And Peter's Adventures asks, Ewen, if you do, could you please consider moving to Durban to coach our Sharks?
Well, I don't mind Durban. Durban's one of my more favourite cities. So,
it's a beautiful place.
It's a good place, Durban. I've got a lot of time for South Africa. I've seen South Africa over 30 or 40 years now, so I've sort of got a real feel for it, and I've got my favourite parts of the country. It's a really interesting place to go. If everyone gets the chance to visit, you should go there.
So, listen, that easily takes us then on to quickly to the just a conversation about R360, because I think where it needs to be looked at is inside the context of the game where it is, the game where it's come from, and professionalism. Because, what R360, part of the proposition is that, the players need to be paid more. Their salaries, are going to be, gigantic compared to where they are now. But it sits inside the context of where the game has come from. And again, South Africa is an interesting place to start, because at the dawn of professionalism, you were there. You were right in the middle of the development of the WRC, which was the rebel movement back in 1995, when the players were looking to move the game to professionalism. And as I say, you were a key mover in that. Can you tell us the story?
I was in the car parks post-training, signing players up. I remember it well. So and then getting phone calls from the old guard, like all the old players and stuff, and wanting to know what's going on and So it was quite a stressful time. But we're at that point, and that's when we look at where we are now. I don't know how many more revolutions you need. That was a fairly significant change, and it was complicated, but that was in a way it was player led. The people that were doing the work were the players around the world. So each of the countries had their own players who were actively involved in sort of I guess, selling the proposition to the rest of the players, and that's in and around training sessions and things like that. That's what you went, because in those days you were training 2-3 nights a week or something like that. It wasn't like you were you had a home base or something like that where you could have conversations. You were sort of catching up with people. They were still going back to work and doing whatever, so you were catching up with them around training and trying to sell the proposition. So yeah, we all, there's a few of us that we met with the Packer guys who were involved in the cricket, the whole cricket thing that went through. So we talked to them about the experience of how they sort of modernised the cricket game and came up with the one-day stuff. And so that all it was a stressful time, and you never quite know. You look back and go, well, maybe some things, you look back, could have done it differently or whatever. It didn't. It was hard. It forced change overnight. I think basically the rugby unions were talking about a change over time, and that would have been just dribbles. Like, it would have been like just throwing a few bits of chicken feed out, and that'd be like that sort of thing. But it really wasn't a sustainable situation where players, we're all working. That's what people need to understand. We all had to go back to our jobs and whatever. I went to the World Cup. I was working in a job and I took leave. I took so much leave without pay that you actually get to the point you couldn't get a promotion within your job because you just weren't there enough to be able to justify getting. So you could never actually grow your salary or anything like that in a work environment because you weren't there enough. You were just taking leave without pay. So you still had to have a sympathetic employer to allow you to have the leave without pay. That's what you had to do because you were going away for 6-8 week blocks. The World Cup 91, that was 8 weeks or something like that. And so that's how it was, You still had to go to even a test camp. You were going in on we used to get together on a Thursday, then it became a Wednesday, then it was a Tuesday night. You'd get together and do scrums against a club side or something, and then you'd so it just got longer. And then in those days, you're allowed to, as an amateur, you're allowed to receive $20 a day, $20 Australian or £20 if you're in the UK. That's what you got, $20. And that's it. So if you had a mortgage and other things, it was a very difficult life. So, and then they added Super Rugby, and it sort of Super Rugby sort of came in so that you didn't have time to do more than just be a test player, taking leave without pay to go on tours. And then the rest of the time you're just playing, you're doing a couple of nights training and playing, New South Wales versus Queensland or something like that. So to be anything more in terms of time involvement, you just had to become full-time. You had to have a salary that allowed you to be able to do more things and not have to take leave without pay. That's just my own personal experience. It was the same for everyone else. You had to have a job.
But there was also significant revenues being generated by the players playing the game. And there's a story I tell, and this really sort of did it for me. It was on that 1992 tour of South Africa, the reunification series, and I was heading into the game against Eastern Province at Port Elizabeth, and I ran across Tim Gavin and Willie Offahengawe standing at the top of the hill, sort of as you led down to the game, and they had a couple of big kit bags at their feet. And as I was walking past them, they were dressed in their number ones. I said, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "We're selling kit." I said, "What do you mean you're selling kit?" And they're like, "We're selling old boots, we're selling old jerseys, and we're selling old T-shirts to raise a bit of money for the team fund because we get, as you say, we're getting $20 a day." And to me at that point, that just did me. And I was like, well, this is ridiculous. This has got to change. And so there was absolutely a need for the reasons that you pointed out. But for that reason alone, here were these great champions, like flogging off this old gear, and it made absolutely no sense to me.
Everyone did the same thing. So, and there's some funny stories around like other teams. I know, when you played a game somewhere, you're on tour and you're playing a game midweek somewhere like that. You always had your dirties, right? The guys that weren't playing. Every team called them something different, but dirties, they weren't playing, right? They were dirty because they weren't playing. They were double dirty because they weren't on the bench, so they were dirty. So they had to do the jobs of like those sort of tasks. They had to go and get outside the stadium, and what they used to do, you can probably talk about it now, but back in the day you couldn't say anything because of amateur status. But they'd give you a bunch of tickets for the game, so then there was always a few extras. So they go and flog them off to someone out in the street, and try and generate a bit of income that way. But there's many a team that sold more tickets than they actually had. They actually sold the dirty seats, right? Because they got to be enthusiastic. So there's nowhere for the extra players to sit during the game because they got to be enthusiastic selling. So there'd be players around, and every tour was the same, and you had this role. But Bob Dwyer was pretty commercial. We didn't always sell old kit. We actually had stuff manufactured. We had T-shirts and like T-shirts and things made up for tours. Like you could have, and we had a 1 year we had, which is quite nice. It was around the World Cup. We had like the Australian cricket cap. We had the same cap made, but it had the same with the logo and a little thing called rugby. This little rugby underneath. That was it. And they're cool caps, but they're expensive. But people bought them, especially in the UK. So that's. We actually merchandised. We were doing merch before merch even existed. So we were merching ourselves, So we had like in the team kit there was bags of merchandise, T-shirts and things like that, which we flogged off around. That's what the Dirty Dirties had to do: sell tickets and sell, and just not sell the tickets. But that's, and there was a team fund, and at the end of it, you could you got bugger all out of it at the end of it. But what it is defray the costs, the day-to-day costs. You're getting $20 a day. Like what's $20 get you now? You can't get a McDonald's for $20. Like, what's a coffee? So it's not. Yeah. It wasn't. You still had to have you're staying in decent hotels in London. If you go and have a coffee in the foyer or a sandwich or something like that, it was like it was £20. That was gone. Your money was gone. Yeah, and they haven't even made a phone call home yet. So that's the other thing. You still had your phone costs and things like that. It wasn't mobile phone territory where free phone plans and none of that. You had to pay for the phone, landline costs and stuff. So it was hard yakka. So that all of that drove the fact that they wanted to have more games. They were putting more test matches on, and yet none of us had the time because we all still had to work. So that was fundamentally. So the players drove that. That's the difference. This is what's happening now seems to be different. I don't know much about it, but we drove all that, and we and the players recruited the players. Yeah, and that's what happened.
But this is sort of, so we move to now R360, and again, there are a range of things, and anyone listens to Rugby Unity will know my strident opposition to the whole exercise, because this is not the time for revolution. I think that was the time for revolution. That was the time. That was the need for change. Whereas now, and I think Brett Robinson spoke very well about it this week post the Women's Rugby World Cup, is that the game has to go together. The game cannot afford the distraction of something like R360. There needs to be a unity about the sport, because it remains in a perilous financial position when you look at it from a global perspective. And most of the all of the unions don't have enough money to fund the potential of the sport. And when Brett Robinson was elected, he said his number one priority was to secure the future and financial prosperity of all of the national unions. And so I just can't see how in any universe, taking however many players, a couple of hundred players out of the game, be it men's and women's. Probably I can see more of a case for the women, because they're back probably in many cases where the men's players were back in 1995, where they're not getting paid and they still have to have jobs and everything else. So I can see a case perhaps for the women, but I just don't see that this is what we need in the sport at this time. And there are a whole range of things that I don't like about it, and I'll come to it in a moment. But from what you have seen, what do you think? Because I think, as far as I'm concerned, we've seen this movie before in Super League, in Rugby League in Australia, where there was this sort of rebel circus that was introduced and it all ended in tears. And if you go through the quotes from the Super League at the time, they're almost exactly, the proposition for Rugby 360. So John Rebo said back in the day, to protect your past, you must protect your future. We want to make the game faster, more intense and dramatic. There'll be more investment than ever before in the game and it will reach millions more households. Players' salaries will triple. It'll be made for TV. There'll be special match day entertainment. There'll be rule innovations that will appeal to a new generation. Now, they're all quotes from John Rebo, who was the prime mover behind Super League. And that ended up costing over $500 million. They played for one season. It was, apart from the TMO and nighttime match grand finals, that's all it got. And all we got out of it was distraction, dislocation, disharmony. It was an absolute disaster. And I can't see Rugby R360 as it's been presented being anything else other than a complete distraction and at a time when the game can least afford it. But that's my thoughts. What do you think about R360?
I'm probably the same. I think we've already had the revolution. I don't know that we can tolerate another one. I think there's been a lot of growth in different sectors of the game. It's not by any means finished, but I think this, to me, looks, I don't know much about it. Obviously, they're already shrinking what the offering was. It's gone from 8 teams to 6 already. It looks to me like someone said, Hong Kong Sevens from 20 years ago or 30 years ago, we want to just replicate that and play in 6 cities around the world or something like that, like a weekend, and have other things going on. I'd think, well, who's going to go to that? Like who's going to go? Like, not the real fan.
Well,
so who can afford to go to that?
In Lisbon?
Yeah,
in Boston?
No,
in Dubai? In Cape Town? In Miami?
No, it's not Formula One.
This is what they're saying.
No, I don't see it. It's not Formula One. And I see the only upside I can see is players seeing big dollars for less games. You get big dollars and play a handful of games. So I see it as a superannuation activity, and that's not going to attract people, to see people playing in their 40s. That's what I see. So I don't know. The rugby league players, the rugby league players aren't coming from rugby pedigree background. So who's to say they're going to be any good? It's not easy to make that transition. It's not easy at all. I've done it with many players. I've been involved with all of the rugby league converts. I had Gazner when I was at Stade Francais in Paris, and all of them. So and they all made different.
Rogers, Takiri,
Sailor, yep, and others. So it's not easy. And so if you're going to get involved in that, you want to see the best, theoretically best of the best. It's got to be some, and that's not what that's going to be. I just don't see it working. I think for the same reason that Sevens doesn't work as well for me, is that it is only played in Australia once a year for one weekend. That's it. That's why it doesn't get going. And so the people actually go, that's great, but that's not going to sustain the interest, And I just don't see it. I just don't see the money matching the level of interest. The money
Rugby Union has 500 million fans around the world and 800 million followers, and they're numbers by Nielsen. And I have not found one of those 500 million who wants this thing. No, nobody's arguing for it. And the potential dislocation to the ecosystem, like if you take those players, whoever they are, and you take them out of the Prem, you take them from URC, you take them from Top 14, you take them from Super Rugby, you're going to undermine those tournaments, which are making, there's signs of progress across all of them. Like they're all not the finished product just yet, but they are making progress. We've now had Red Bull come in and take over at Newcastle Falcons in Newcastle in the UK, or they're now called the Newcastle Red Bulls. So there are so many promising signs that I just can't see that this privatised model, because is R360 going to fund the academies? Is R360 going to fund the pathways? Is R360 going to fund the referees? It's like it's not going to happen, or they're not going to do it. But the other thing is that we don't know. We don't know exactly what this is about because no one ever fronts. Nobody stands behind it. We know that, Mike Tyndall and a few others are there, but, no one's coming out and announcing it. No one's giving us the details. And apparently the teams and the players are going to be endorsed by the United Arab Emirates, and maybe that's a tell that some of the money is coming from the UAE. But I can't see that this is in the UAE's best interest, because this will be a rolled gold disaster, and it will blow back on anyone who's involved in it, whether you're a sponsor, whether you're an owner, whether you are a funder. I think anyone who gets involved in this is going to have a very, very clear think about it, whether you're a player. Look, I understand the player managers and their interests. It's right up their alley, because they're going to get a payday out of it. But I just think I think it's completely ridiculous. And these ideas of that they're going to be London, Miami, Tokyo, Dubai, Boston, Cape Town, Lisbon, and Madrid. And, that it's some sort of live golf where you're just going to, roll people in and roll people out. Like putting 24 golfers on one golf course over a particular weekend, that's one thing. Imagine putting 6 men's and 4 women's rugby teams and having to find all of the facilities and the scrum machines and the buses and the hotels and the food. And it just makes no sense. So that's it for me. But again, we just don't know. And again, we've had this wonderful Women's Rugby World Cup. We've had this tremendous Rugby Championship. We now roll into the end of the year. There is so much to look forward to. This is a complete and total distraction, and I just wish the whole thing would go away. And I am more than happy to have a look at it as it comes through, but I am going to put it under the microscope week after week after week, because I would hope that we can knock it over and it can go away and we don't have to think about it again, because it is a total and complete distraction. So anyway, Ewen McKenzie, thank you so much for coming along once again. And to you, the audience, thank you for your ongoing and continued support, whether it's through listening or watching the podcast, engaging with Instagram Reels, engaging on TikTok, on Substack, across Facebook, wherever you are engaging with Rugby Unity. Thank you so much for your support. We really do so grateful. It is growing. It continues to grow. The enthusiasm is great. The participation is great. So please, a rating, a review, a subscribe, a like, a share, anything that gets the message out about Rugby Unity helps us to be found by more people, and therefore helps us on our mission to help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. So very grateful once again to Eddie Jones and Ewen McKenzie, and grateful to you, the audience. But for the moment, please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.